The Zenthari honor guard stood perfectly still as their transport descended through Earth's atmosphere, their iridescent scales shifting colors with each minor gravitational fluctuation. Ambassador Cathrix watched his elite protection unit with quiet satisfaction. Each guard had been personally selected from the finest warriors in the galaxy. Their species evolved from apex predators who had once ruled the harsh worlds of the Zenthari system. Their landing at the United Nations spaceport was textbook perfect, as expected. What wasn't expected were the small humans waiting at the reception area. Ambassador Cathrix, a tiny female human, barely reaching the height of a Zenthari's waist, broke protocol and waved enthusiastically. "I'm Emily from Ms. Johnson's third-grade class. We're your welcome committee." Vex Thor, the security chief, instinctively moved to intercept, but found himself suddenly surrounded by a swarm of 8-year-olds. His secondary eyelids flickered in confusion as one particularly bold child reached out to touch his ceremonial armor. "Your scales are so pretty," the child exclaimed, causing Vex Thor's scales to flush an embarrassed purple. "Do they change color with your mood?" That is, the fearsome warrior, veteran of the Proxima Wars and survivor of 3 assassination attempts, found himself completely tactically disadvantaged by a group of small humans in matching blue uniforms. Ambassador Cathrix suppressed what humans would call a smile. "I was informed that Earth's educational institutions often arrange these cultural exchanges," he said smoothly. "It promotes understanding between our species." "Unacceptable," Vex Thor muttered in Zenthari. "How can we maintain proper security protocols with these? Tommy, get down from there, right now." A human teacher's voice cut through the chaos. But it was too late. One of the children had already managed to climb up Vex Thor's ceremonial cave and was now perched on the warrior's shoulder armor, grinning triumphantly. The entire Zenthari guard unit watched in horror as their chief stood frozen, unable to remove the child without risking an interplanetary incident. Their advanced combat training had never covered this scenario. "I can see everything from up here," Tommy announced proudly. "Your head looks like a diamond." Cathrix noticed his security chief's scales cycling through colors that indicated severe emotional distress. The ambassador made a mental note to review Earth's protocols regarding children. Clearly, they required additional study. "Perhaps," Cathrix suggested diplomatically, "we should proceed to the security briefing." "Of course, Ambassador." A human security officer finally stepped forward, efficiently extracting Tommy from his perch with practiced ease. Ms. Johnson's class was just leaving. "Thank you for your enthusiasm, children." As the class was herded away, Vex Thor straightened his cape with as much dignity as he could muster. "This planet is chaos," he declared in Zenthari. "How can they expect us to maintain proper security when their young are allowed to scale you like a training obstacle?" One of the junior guards offered, quickly silencing himself at his chief's glare. "The summit begins in 3 days," Thrix reminded them. "This meeting could finally grant humanity full membership in the Galactic Council. Our mission is crucial." "With respect, Ambassador," Vex Thor said, his scales still showing traces of embarrassment. "I fail to see how these humans could possibly be ready for council membership. They can't even control their offspring." A passing human security officer caught the translator's output and smiled. "Just wait until you see what our adults can do," she said cryptically, continuing down the hallway before Vex Thor could demand an explanation. The security chief watched her go, his secondary eyelids narrowing. Something about her tone bothered him, but he couldn't quite identify why. He made a mental note to increase surveillance on all human security personnel. Clearly, there was more to these Deathworlders than their initial briefing had suggested. He just hoped he wouldn't have to deal with any more children. The diplomatic incident started, as they often did, with Amraxian insulting a Valaxian's ancestral star cluster. Vex Thor and his guards moved to intervene, their scales rippling with anticipation of finally seeing some action. But before they could reach the arguing delegates, a commanding voice cut through the tension. "Gentlemen, Might I remind you that the chocolate fountain is right around the corner? And I hear the Mraxian delegation brought those little pastries that change flavor based on the eater's mood. The effect was instantaneous. Both aliens, each nearly 8 feet tall and bristling with natural armor, turned to face the small human female who had stepped between them. Madison Cooper, her diplomatic security uniform crisp despite the late hour, smiled pleasantly, but there was steel behind that smile. I'd hate to file an incident report, she continued, her tone somehow both friendly and carrying an unspoken threat, especially since those take up so much time we could spend enjoying those pastries. Vexthor watched in fascination as both delegates mumbled apologies and shuffled off toward the refreshment area. His thermal vision caught Madison's elevated heart rate. She had been ready for violence, but her exterior had remained completely calm. Impressive, Kithrix commented, approaching from where he had been observing. Most beings cannot diffuse a Mraxian rage state once it begins. How did you know about the pastries? Madison's professional demeanor softened slightly. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Ambassador. You learn to redirect attention when tantrums start brewing. Before Kithrix could respond, Madison's communicator chimed with a familiar tune, the theme song from some human children's entertainment program. Her entire bearing transformed as she answered. Hey, baby girl. No, Mommy's not too busy. Did you finish your homework? That's my smart girl. Vexthor's secondary eyelids flickered in confusion as he watched the same human who had just stared down 2 of the galaxy's most notorious warriors now make exaggerated expressions at her communication device, where a small human child was apparently showing her a crude art project. Of course I want to see your drawing. Is that Mommy? Why do I have green hair? Oh, it's because green is your favorite color. That makes perfect sense. I don't understand, one of the junior guards whispered in Zenthari. She shifts between warrior and whatever this is, without any transitional period. It defies psychological profiling. Kithrix, however, was fascinated. Tell me, Officer Cooper, is this duality common among human parents? Madison looked up from her call. Just a second, Lucy. Ambassador, with all due respect, it's not duality. It's the same thing, protecting those who need it. Sometimes that means stopping fights. Sometimes it means being a safe place for a child to share their art. She turned back to her device. Sorry, sweetie. Yes, I'll bring the drawing to show my alien friends tomorrow. Love you too. Be good for Mrs. Martinez. As she ended the call, her professional demeanor returned seamlessly. But Vexthor had noticed something his subordinates missed. Her combat readiness had never actually dropped during the conversation. Even while discussing green hair with her offspring, she had maintained perfect situational awareness. Fascinating. Kithrix murmured. Your species continues to surprise us. Madison checked her timepiece. If you'll excuse me, Ambassador, I need to do my rounds. The Andromedan delegation arrives in 20 minutes, and they're always early. As she walked away, Vexthor turned to his commander. I don't like it, he declared. Her behavior patterns are too irregular. How can we predict the actions of a species that can switch emotional states so quickly? Kithrix watched Madison efficiently organizing the human security team at the far end of the hall. Perhaps, my friend, that is precisely the point. Now, shall we discuss how a mere mention of pastries prevented what could have been a significant diplomatic incident? Vexthor's scales flickered with annoyance. He had a feeling this assignment was going to give him a headache, and somewhere in the building, he could hear more human children on another tour. He really hoped they stayed far away from his cape this time. The third security breach in 24 hours had everyone on edge. First, a malfunctioning service drone had accidentally accessed a restricted area. Then, someone had mislabeled the Centaurian ambassador's hibernation pod as a storage unit. Now, at 300 hours Earth time, Vexthor's sensors detected movement in the diplomatic quarters. Unknown entity approaching the Mraxian delegation's chambers, he subvocalized to his team. Biorhythms indicate confusion. Ready containment protocols. 4 Zenthari guards moved into position, their scales shifting to match the corridor's shadows. The figure stumbled forward in the dim light, moving erratically. "Hold." Madison's whispered command caught them off guard. She had appeared seemingly from nowhere, despite the Zenthari's superior sensory capabilities. "The target is approaching a restricted zone," Vex Thoriest. "We must." "It's Ambassador Clerics," Madison interrupted softly. "He's sleepwalking." The Zenthari watched in disbelief as she approached the confused Meraxian diplomat, who stood nearly twice her height. Their species was notorious for violent reactions when startled. "Ambassador," Madison called gently, keeping her voice low and soothing. "You're heading the wrong way. Your quarters are down the other corridor." The ambassador's secondary mandibles twitched. "The stars must realign. The convergence." "Of course," Madison agreed, as if this made perfect sense. "But the star charts are in your room. Here, let me help you find them." With remarkable patience, she guided the somnambulant alien in a wide arc, never touching him, but somehow managing to redirect his path. The Zenthari observed as she used the ambassador's own momentum to steer him back toward his assigned quarters. "Fascinating technique," Kithrix commented from behind them, making several guards jump. "Did you learn that from your offspring as well?" Madison waited until the ambassador was safely back in his room before responding. "Lucy was a sleepwalker when she was 4. You learn to redirect without waking them. Same principle applies to most species, really." "We would have subdued him," Vexthor admitted, his scales showing bands of what humans might interpret as embarrassment, "and risked an diplomatic incident when he woke up confused and restrained." Madison shook her head. "Sometimes the softer approach is also the tactically sound one." Before Vexthor could respond, another alarm pinged on their security networks. The anti-alien protesters outside had grown in number despite the late hour. Their chants were becoming more aggressive. "Humans first. No more aliens. Earth for EART. Arst." Madison's expression hardened as she checked her datapad. "They've brought mining equipment this time. Trying to look industrial rather than militant, but those plasma cutters aren't standard issue." Finally, one of the younger Zenthari guards said, "A threat we can handle directly." "Not yet," Madison corrected him. "They're staying just within legal protest boundaries. We watch, we wait, we document." The moment they crossed the line, she stopped mid-sentence, head tilting slightly. "What is it?" Vexthor demanded, his own sensors detecting nothing unusual. "The chanting. It's too regular. Like it's being amplified and played back." She tapped her communicator. "Control, can we get a sonic analysis of the protest noise? Something feels off." The Zenthari's respect reluctantly notched higher as preliminary scans confirmed her suspicion. The protesters were real, but their chants were being enhanced by hidden speakers, creating the impression of a larger crowd while masking other sounds. A distraction, Vexthor realized. But from what? That's the question, isn't it? Madison was already moving, her stance shifting subtly into what the Zenthari now recognized as her combat-ready mode. "Ambassador, I recommend you return to the secure conference room." "Vexthor, can your team do a full-spectrum sweep of the building's perimeter?" Kithrix watched her efficiently organizing their response, noting how she balanced authority with respect for the Zenthari's pride. "You know," he commented to his security chief, "for a species you classified as too soft, they show remarkable tactical awareness." Vexthor's scales rippled with annoyance, but as he watched Madison coordinating between 3 different species security teams while simultaneously monitoring the protests and running background checks on the new maintenance staff, he had to admit, perhaps humans weren't quite as soft as he'd initially thought. He just hoped they wouldn't need to test that theory under fire. Bio readings indicate elevated heart rate and adrenaline spike, the Zenthari medical officer reported, monitoring Madison through their advanced sensors. "Recommendation: relieve the human from duty until..." "Belay that," Vexthor interrupted, watching Madison maintain her position with perfect composure. Through the reinforced windows of the UN's main hall, they could see why her vital signs had jumped. 30 human children were being led through the security checkpoint, and a familiar small figure was bouncing excitedly in the middle of the group. Lucy's class wasn't supposed to tour until next week, Madison subvocalized through their shared comm channel. Her exterior betrayed nothing, but the Zenthari could hear the tension in her voice. Schedule must have changed. Thrix, observing from his position near the Galactic Council's preliminary membership panel, seemed amused. Your species continues to demonstrate interesting priorities. Officer Cooper, your offspring's presence creates more physiological stress than this morning's security breaches. Different kind of stress, Ambassador, Madison replied professionally, though her eyes never left the approaching group. Combat situations are straightforward. Parent-teacher conferences are terrifying. A ripple of confusion passed through the Zenthari guard scales at this apparent attempt at human humor, but their attention quickly shifted as Lucy broke away from her group, running straight toward the security line, despite her teacher's protests. Mom, look what The 6-year-old skidded to a halt, remembering at the last second her mother's instructions about work behavior. She straightened up, attempting to mirror Madison's professional stance. Good morning, Officer Cooper. Madison's lip twitched slightly. Good morning, Miss Cooper. Your class is supposed to stay together. But Mom, there's a weird box. The Zenthari guards tensed, their scales shifting to combat readiness. They had learned to take human children seriously after one had spotted a camouflaged Proximan spy that had fooled their best sensors. Define weird, Madison requested, her tone still professional, but with an undertone the Zenthari had learned meant she was fully alert. It's humming, Lucy said, pointing to an ornamental planter near the Regellian delegation's seating area. And it smells like Uncle Jake's garage when he's working on his hoverbike. Vexthor was already moving, his sensors recalibrating. The planter had passed 3 security suites, but energy signature detected, he announced, masked by the building's power grid harmonics. Clever. That's my girl, Madison whispered, pride briefly overtaking her professional demeanor. Then, louder, Ms. Johnson, please evacuate your class to Safe Zone 3. Standard procedure, make it fun. Like a game. The teacher, well-drilled in UN security protocols, immediately began herding the children away while singing an educational song about space travel. Lucy lingered for a moment, looking torn. Go with your class, Madison ordered gently. Remember what we discussed about Mommy's work. Stay safe, follow instructions, and if anything goes wrong, run toward the blue lights, Lucy recited, then quickly hugged her mother's legs before running to rejoin her classmates. Explosive device confirmed, the Zenthari tech specialist reported. But its configuration is unusual. It's not meant to explode, Madison realized, studying the readings on her datapad. It's a sonic pulse generator disguised as a bomb, meant to disrupt the universal translators during the membership vote. Thrix's scales darkened with concern. Without translators, the vote would be invalid. We'd have to reschedule, and Earth's application window would expire. Acting against their own species' interests, Vexthor mused. These protesters are more complex than we assumed. Madison was already coordinating with the disposal team, but she spared a moment to pat Lucy's forgotten lunch bag, which had been dropped during the excitement. Sometimes the smallest humans see what we miss, she said quietly. They haven't learned to ignore their instincts yet. The Zenthari watched as she maintained her post, while simultaneously monitoring both the device's disposal and her daughter's class's safe evacuation. Her vital signs had steadied, showing the calm focus they had come to recognize as her combat mode. Perhaps, Thrix suggested to his security chief, we should consider adding human children to our sensor array validation protocols. Vexthor's scales flickered with what might have been amusement. Agreed. But let's not tell them about the Cape incident. The Zenthari's threat assessment systems were overwhelming their neural processors. In the space of 3 minutes, everything had gone wrong. Primary power grid failure confirmed. A junior guard reported, his scales pulsing emergency patterns. Backup systems are responding sluggishly. Someone's corrupted the protocols. Perimeter breach in sectors 7 and 12. Another called out. The protesters are using the power fluctuations to mask their approach. Estimated 60 individuals, carrying mining equipment. Vexthor's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly as he processed the cascade of failures. This is too coordinated. The sonic device was never meant to disrupt the translators. It was a test of our detection capabilities. Madison's voice cut through the chaos. All units, switch to Emergency Protocol Delta 9. Human security teams, deploy riot suppressors. Zentheri units, your thermal vision isn't affected by the power loss. Take up overwatch positions. The diplomatic vehicle bay is reporting anomalies, Kithrix added, his usually calm voice tense. The autonomous systems are acting erratically. Through the reinforced windows, they could see the protesters advancing. But something about their movement caught Madison's attention. They're not pushing toward the main entrance, she realized. They're herding people toward the courtyard. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the diplomatic vehicle's AI systems went haywire. 3 sleek hovercars, designed to transport VIP aliens whose physiologies couldn't handle human vehicles, lurched to life. Lucy's class, Madison breathed, her vital signs spiking so dramatically that the Zentheri medical officer's sensors briefly overloaded. They were evacuated to the courtyard. Negative on intervention, Vexthor ordered as several guards moved to respond. We must maintain position around the diplomatic. The rest of his sentence was lost as Madison vaulted over the security barrier, moving faster than the Zentheri's combat systems could track. Their sensors registered her muscle tension patterns shifting into configurations that should have been impossible for human physiology. Cooper, stand down. Vexthor commanded. The structural integrity of the... Another power surge hit, and the diplomatic vehicle's containment fields completely failed. One of them, a massive drachnid transport weighing over 4 tons, spun wildly toward the group of children. The teachers were trying to herd them to safety, but Lucy had tripped, falling behind the group. Multiple hostiles breaching the west entrance, a guard reported. Ambassador Kithrix's security is compromised, called another. The translation systems are fully down, a third added. But Vexthor barely registered these reports. His entire attention was locked on his sensors, which were recording something that violated every known law of xenobiology. Madison Cooper, her body producing stress hormones at levels that should have already induced unconsciousness, was moving at speeds that rivaled their own enhanced reflexes. Impossible readings, the medical officer muttered. Her muscle fibers are exceeding their tensile strength limitations by factors off. The drachnid transport careened toward Lucy, who froze in terror. In the same instant, 3 things happened. The Zentheri sensors detected Madison's skeletal structure beginning to show micro-fractures from the forces she was subjecting it to. The security cameras caught her crossing 50 meters in a time that would have qualified for human Olympic records. And every audio pickup in range captured what the Zentheri would later describe in their reports as a vocalization that resonated on frequencies typically associated with capital ship warning klaxons. Get away from my doctor. The courtyard erupted into chaos as protesters, security forces, and diplomats all turned toward the sound. Even the malfunctioning vehicle's AI seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. It wasn't enough. The transport slammed into the courtyard's decorative barrier and began to tip, directly over Lucy's small frozen form. The Zentheri Guard unit, for the first time in their celebrated history, found themselves completely unable to respond. Their combat computers simply couldn't process the scenario unfolding before them. But Madison Cooper was no longer bound by anyone's processing limitations. The Zentheri's advanced combat recording systems captured every millisecond of what happened next, though their analysts would spend months trying to explain it. Madison reached the falling transport in 2.3 seconds. Her body's stress readings had exceeded every known threshold for human consciousness, yet her movements showed practiced precision. As the massive vehicle tipped toward Lucy, Madison's hands found the passenger compartment's reinforced frame. "Medical override," the Zenthari health officer shouted. "Subject's skeletal structure is..." "Mom." Lucy's voice was tiny, terrified. Something changed in Madison's biosignatures. The Zenthari sensors recorded a massive surge of chemicals: adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, the human body's emergency response system engaging all at once. But there was something else, something their systems couldn't quite categorize. "Get back." Vex Thor commanded his unit, their sensors detecting a bizarre energy reading from Madison's direction. "All personnel, clear the..." The sound that cut him off wasn't quite a scream. It was deeper, more primal, the kind of roar that had echoed across Earth's savannas when humanity's ancestors first stood upright and decided they weren't prey anymore. It carried notes that resonated with something ancient in every species present, a reminder that humans hadn't evolved from apex predators like the Zenthari. They had become apex predators through sheer, unstoppable determination. "Analysis impossible," the medical officer reported, his scales shifting through colors of confusion and disbelief. "Subject Cooper's muscle fibers are operating at 400% capacity. Skeletal reinforcement failing. Tendon structure exceeding material limits. She's literally tearing herself apart, but her nervous system is ignoring it." The transport, weighing approximately 4,327 kilograms Earth standard, shifted. Not much, just enough. "Lucy, roll." The child, snapping out of her terror, did exactly as she'd been trained. As she cleared the vehicle's shadow, Madison's arms shook with forces that were cracking her bones and shredding her muscles. The Zenthari recordings would later show tears streaming down her face, not from emotion, but from blood vessels bursting in her eyes from the strain. "This defies several laws of physics," Thrix whispered, watching Madison hold the transport's weight just long enough for another teacher to dart in and drag Lucy to safety. The moment Lucy was clear, Madison's body began to give out. The transport's mass was too great, even for whatever impossible thing she'd temporarily become. But even as her body failed, her mind stayed focused. She let gravity take the vehicle, but she controlled its fall. Instead of crashing straight down, she guided its momentum away from the remaining children, paying for each millisecond of control with more micro-fractures in her bones. The transport slammed into the courtyard's decorative barriers with a sound like thunder. Madison collapsed, her body finally registering the damage she'd done to it. But her eyes remained locked on Lucy, tracking her daughter's movement until she was safely behind the Zenthari security line. Only then did she allow herself to pass out. "Medical team, now." Vex Thor roared, his own voice carrying notes of that same primal protective instinct they'd heard in Madison's cry. His scales had shifted to colors that indicated deep, respectful fear, and combination the Zenthari language had no word for. The protesters, who had gone silent watching the display, suddenly found themselves facing a very angry Zenthari guard unit. Their surrender was immediate and absolute. Thrix approached the medical team as they worked on Madison. "Will she survive?" The head medic nodded. "Humans are remarkably resilient. 13 bones showing stress fractures, multiple torn muscles, internal bleeding from overtaxed blood vessels. But her cellular regeneration is already active. She'll recover." He paused, checking his readings again. "Though she may need reconstructive surgery on her hands, the bones there took the worst damage. Her first question when she wakes will be about her offspring," the ambassador predicted. "Already handled," Vex Thor reported. His scales showed embarrassment as he added, "I may have assigned our entire medical containment unit to guard the child. It seemed appropriate." Lucy, safely ensconced behind multiple layers of the galaxy's finest warriors, watched the medical team work on her mother. Her small hand reached up to grab Vex Thor's cape, But this time, the warrior didn't mind at all. "Play it again," Kithrix requested, studying the holographic replay for what must have been the 100th time. The medical bay screens flickered with data as the scene unfolded once more. The Zenthari medical team had been analyzing the footage for 6 hours straight, their scales shifting through shades of professional frustration. On the main display, Madison's impossible feat played out in micro-detail, each millisecond broken down into quantifiable data that somehow still defied explanation. "Focus on time, stamp 143207. The chief medical officer suggested, his secondary eyelids flickering rapidly. The moment her body begins exceeding normal human limitations. The hologram froze on Madison's face, capturing the exact instant maternal instinct overwrote physical possibility. The data scrolls beside the image told an impossible story. Muscles operating at 4 times their maximum capacity, bones bearing loads that should have shattered them instantly, neural pathways firing faster than human biology should allow. We've documented 17 similar incidents in human historical records, a junior analyst reported, bringing up comparative data. A mother lifting a vehicle to save a trapped child in Florida. Another in Texas moving a fallen beam. A father in Japan holding up a collapsed wall. He paused, scales showing confusion, but none of them were monitored with our level of biosensors. We're the first to record the process in real time. In the medical bay behind them, Madison slept. Her daughter Lucy had refused to leave her side, currently curled up in a chair that Vexthor himself had arranged to be specially cushioned. The security chief stood guard personally, his scales still showing that untranslatable combination of respect and fear. Her hands took the worst damage, the medical officer noted, bringing up detailed skeletal scans. Multiple fractures in both, but particularly the right. Human medical science can repair it, but he trailed off, watching Lucy shift in her sleep. "But what?" Kithrix prompted. But she never hesitated. The sensors show she was aware, on some level, of the damage she was doing to herself. She simply chose to ignore it. A soft grunt from the bed drew their attention. Madison's eyes fluttered open, immediately seeking out Lucy. Only after confirming her daughter's safety did she seem to register her own condition. "How bad?" she asked, voice rough. "You have 13 fractures, multiple torn muscles, severe soft tissue damage, and you managed to burst several blood vessels in your eyes," the medical officer reported. "Also, you violated approximately 6 laws of physics and 17 established rules of xenobiology." Madison managed a weak smile. "Sounds about right." She tried to move her hands, wincing. The transport. Completely shut down, Vexthor reported from his post. The protesters had inserted a viral AI meant to target the diplomatic corps. Very sophisticated. Very illegal. His scales flickered with dark satisfaction. "They are being thoroughly interviewed. The other children." "All safe," Kithrix assured her. "Though I believe several of them now want to grow up to be, quote, as awesome as Lucy's mom." Madison's laugh turned into a cough. "Great. Parent-teacher conferences just got more interesting." She looked down at her bandaged hands. "How long until I can return to duty?" The medical officer's scales showed exasperation. Humans, always asking the wrong questions. He moved closer, his voice dropping. "What we want to know is, how did you do it? Our sensors recorded forces that should have been physically impossible for your species to generate." Madison's eyes drifted to Lucy, still peacefully asleep in her oversized chair. "Have you ever loved something so much," she asked quietly, "that the universe's rules just don't matter anymore?" The Zenthari exchanged glances, their scales showing various shades of revelation. They had evolved from predators, had built their civilization on strength and martial prowess. But this was something else entirely. "The Galactic Council," Kithrix said carefully, "will be very interested in this data, already classified at the highest levels." Vexthor interjected, his tone leaving no room for argument. Some things deserve to remain mysterious. Besides, he thought, watching Lucy snuggle deeper into the chair he'd requisitioned, some mysteries explain themselves. 3 months later, Lucy Cooper stood before her class for show and tell, holding up a textbook that made her mother both proud and slightly embarrassed. "This is the new Galactic Council Species Guide," Lucy announced with the solemn authority of a 6-year-old expert. "And my mom's in it." The holographic display activated, showing the now-famous footage. Madison, watching from the back of the classroom at Lucy's insistence, noticed how the Xanthari guard unit stationed at the school shifted their scales in respect when the recording played. She'd given up telling Vexthor that a full security detail wasn't necessary for elementary school visits. The chapter's called Human Evolutionary Advantages, Crisis Response and Protective Capabilities. Lucy continued, perfectly pronouncing the words she'd practiced all week. It explains how humans are the only species that can temporarily ignore their physical limitations when protecting their young. In the 3 months since the incident, the Galactic Council's understanding of humanity had undergone a dramatic revision. The footage of Madison's impossible feat had sparked intense scientific interest, leading to the discovery of similar cases throughout human history. "The Xanthari are stronger than humans," Lucy explained, pointing to a comparison chart. "They can lift more and run faster, but they can't exceed their normal strength, even in emergencies. Humans can." She beamed with pride. "The book says we're the only ones who can do that." Madison noticed Kithrix slip into the classroom, his scales showing amusement. The ambassador had become a regular visitor to Earth since the incident, particularly fascinated by human educational methods. "The Council's security doctrine has been completely rewritten," he whispered to Madison as Lucy continued her presentation. "Your species is now classified as situationally Omega-level capable." "Is that good?" Madison asked, flexing her recently healed hands. The Xanthari medical techniques had accelerated her recovery significantly. "It means," Kithrix explained, "that while other species might be consistently stronger or faster, humanity's ability to temporarily exceed your limitations makes you uniquely valuable, especially in crisis situations." Lucy had moved on to showing her classmates the new emergency protocols being implemented across Galactic Council space. "See, they're painting all the emergency exits blue now, just like the ones Mom taught me about." Madison smiled, remembering how her simple family safety rule had been adopted into official council procedures. "Run toward the blue lights" was now standard emergency training for every species. "There's something else," Kithrix added, his scales showing formal patterns. "The Council has approved Earth's membership application. Unanimously." "The protesters' plan backfired completely, didn't it?" Madison observed. "Indeed. Their attempt to prevent Earth's membership instead provided the most compelling argument for it." His scales flickered with what she now recognized as suppressed amusement. Though Vexthor's formal recommendation carried significant weight, the security chief himself stood at perfect attention by the classroom door, his scales still shifting to that unique shade of respectful fear whenever Madison moved too quickly. But he'd also taken to carrying extra human snacks in his equipment pouches, just in case Lucy or her classmates got hungry during his protection duty. And now, Lucy concluded her presentation with flourish. "My mom's teaching the Xanthari guards how to be better at protecting people. Even though they're stronger, she says sometimes being strong isn't as important as being smart and caring about others." "Thank you, Lucy," her teacher said. "Does anyone have questions?" Every hand in the room shot up, human and alien alike. Madison watched her daughter field questions about physics, biology, and emergency procedures with the confidence of someone who had lived through history being made. The incident had changed so much: human-alien relations, security protocols, scientific understanding of human capabilities. But watching Lucy explain to a fascinated Xanthari child why human parents were extra super strong sometimes, but only when really needed, Madison knew the most important things hadn't changed at all. They had simply been confirmed. Love made humans capable of the impossible. And sometimes, the impossible was exactly what the galaxy needed. Vexthor, noticing her expression, shifted his scales to show agreement. He still didn't entirely understand humans, but he was learning to appreciate their mysteries.